This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine. The frigid waters of the Arctic Ocean, 1931. A cargo steamer carrying valuable furs for the Hudson's Bay Company becomes ensnared in the icy clutches of the Alaskan North. She was abandoned, and the crew took shelter at the nearby town of Utqiagvuk, where they were hit by a powerful blizzard. Days later, the crew returned to where they left the SS Baychimo, but she was nowhere in sight. It was assumed that the Baychimo broke free of the ice during the storm and immediately sank, but that was only half true. They crossed paths with a seal hunter traveling from the south, who spotted the ship floating 45 miles away from where the crew had left her. After a few days, they had tracked the steamer down, once again trapped in ice. They boarded her and reclaimed their precious cargo, but something happened on that vessel that inspired true fear in the hearts of these seasoned veterans of the sea. Nobody knows for sure, but some crewmen would go on to speak of dark forces that had taken over the ship, and how she now sailed throughout the northern waters of her own accord, a symbol of death and dismay. All that's certain is that the men abandoned the ship where she stood, expecting her to sink within days. They were wrong. The Baychimo was freed from the ice once more, and she went on to become a maritime enigma, a legend of the frozen seas who would appear and disappear many times since. 2 years later, in March of 1933, a group of Inupiat hunters traveling along the coastline rediscovered the cargo ship. They boarded her in search of equipment and supplies, but out of nowhere a powerful storm came upon them. It wasn't long before the ship was dislodged from the ice by the strong Arctic gales, taking its reluctant passengers out to sea during the worst blizzard in living memory. The group had entered into a realm where survival and the supernatural intertwined, forcing them to navigate the hull of the ship in pitch darkness, rationing food and water with little hope of ever returning to shore. Stranded at sea, they coexisted with the restless spirits that were said to call the Baychimo home, the same ones that seemed to haunt the previous crew as they tried to reclaim her from the elements. After 10 days of hell, the ship once again got packed into a mass of sea ice, and the hunters were able to escape, never looking back at the cursed steamer. Time and time again, those moving by land or sea would encounter what came to be known as the ghost ship of the Arctic Circle. But in 1939, Captain Hugh Poulsen, an old sea dog whose career depended on the retrieval of the Baychimo, hunted her down and led a boarding party, with every intention of salvaging the vessel. This turned into a miserable failure, and little is known of what happened during the mission. When he and his party returned from the ghost ship, Poulsen's face was that of a defeated man. He ordered his crew to leave the Baychimo as she was, and to return to their home port of Vancouver, where he was soon dismissed from the employ of Hudson's Bay Company. He embraced the demon drink, and probably died of syphilis or something. Legend has it that the otherworldly force now governing the Baychimo was able to break Poulsen's spirit, perhaps tormenting him the same way it did with the hunters in 1933, or the original crew salvaging furs back in 31, or any of the other poor souls drawn onto the ship by curiosity. Nevertheless, no mortal being has ever been able to reclaim the vessel. It was last seen in 1969, as always trapped in a patch of ice, its hull rusted through, its deck in shambles, and yet still scraping along, locked in a constant battle against the harsh elements. Many believe that by now she can only be lost at the bottom of the ocean, but others hold out hope that somewhere north of the Arctic Circle there floats an immortal ghost ship, thriving against all odds. Not a symbol of death, but one of freedom and liberty against the constraints of human control. Skeptics believe that the supernatural element attached to these stories is entirely fictitious, but some beg to differ. So little information exists regarding the various boarding parties over the decades, it's difficult to sort fact from fiction. What sets the SS Baychimo apart from the countless other tales of ghost ships across the globe? Why did Captain Poulsen leave a perfectly good boat just lying around in the Arctic? Is it possible that a ghost-like being or even a demonic entity could have seized control of the Baychimo herself, feeding off of human fear for decades? And what about the innocent hunters who were trapped aboard the ship for days on end? When will indigenous people stop being harmed under the merciless boot of colonialism? Only time will tell. Hey you. Yeah, you. Thanks for watching. If you liked this, you're gonna love some of the other shit I have on my channel, so check it out.